Hi everybody, it's Andy here again with the fourth installment in this series of videos all about how to create the student application spreadsheet for Unit 19. In this video, I'll guide you through the process of making the user interface and navigation buttons to allow the user to move around the spreadsheet much more easily. At the moment, the only way to skip from worksheet to worksheet is to use the small tabs at the bottom of each worksheet, which works okay. Course, but we can improve on that, and we're going to use something called a macro to do this. So I've got the student application spreadsheet open here at the point where the last video ended. I've just finished creating my funding worksheet with its fiendish nested if statement in the extra funding column here, and this worksheet's done for now. And the next step is to create the user interface. And to do this, we have to create a brand new worksheet just before the student's worksheet. And that's very easily done. All I'm doing is follow my pointer down here to the funding worksheet tab, and next to that is a insert worksheet tab. So I'm going to click on that, which inserts a worksheet. And I'm going to move that. At the moment, of course, that's after the funding worksheet, after all the others. So I'm going to grab it, and I'm holding down a right click here, and you just move it so that it's before the student's worksheet. So it's the first worksheet. This is going to be our navigation. This is going to contain our navigation buttons. This is going to be our user interface sheet. So it makes sense to have it first. And also, sheet 2 isn't a very catchy name or even appropriate, really. So I'm also going to change the name of this worksheet. Again, that's very easily done. All you do is right-clicking this time on the name of the current name of this worksheet, which is sheet 2. I'm right-clicking on it, and then rename. And I'm going to type in home. Because it's such an important sheet, this I'm going to put it in capitals as well, just because I feel like doing that. This is going to be the center, the sort of the nerve center of the whole spreadsheet here, from where you can go to all other parts of the worksheet of the spreadsheet very easily. So that's my new worksheet created. I'm now going to create my first button, which users of the spreadsheet will be able to click, and this one is going to take them instantly to the student's worksheet. Now, obviously, at the moment, you can do that like that, and then go back to home again. But it's quite a small button. I want a really big button here. Loads bigger than this student tab down here, so that people can very easily click on it. It's a big target, and it'll take them instantly to the student's worksheet. So I'm going to just go to insert here and insert shapes and choose a rectangle. You can use your imagination here, really. Use your creativity for the buttons here. Maybe even students in the past have gone online, and there are plenty of websites on the internet to create really fancy looking buttons, but there's some pretty decent choices, decent options here in the insert shapes. So I'm going to get a rectangle, and the idea with these buttons is they're going to be big, so they're big targets for people to click to take them to other parts of the spreadsheet. And this one is going to take the user to the student's worksheet. Okay, with the insert shapes, you've got a big gallery here. I don't have to settle for that default shaped button. I quite like this one as a button. Makes it look a little bit 3D. And so eventually there's going to be 4 buttons on this worksheet to take us to the other 4 worksheets in the spreadsheet. And this one's going to be the button that takes us to the student's worksheet. So I want to be able to tell. I want the user to be able to tell these buttons apart. So I'm going to add the word students to this button, nice and big. And to do that, you right-click on the button and choose Edit Text. And I'm going to type students in here. It's much too small at the moment, but don't worry about that. We're going to fix that in a second. In fact, while I've still got it, while I'm still in edit text mode here, I'm going to click this button up here to get it to the middle of the button vertically, and then this button to get it to the middle of the button horizontally. And I'm going to, from the drop-down list, I'm going to choose a suitable text size, something nice and big. Oh, I need to, just a second, I need to highlight the text here first. I think like so. Yeah, and then as we go down the list, we get a preview. Something around about 40, 44, something like that. So you can't mistake this button that it'll take us to the student's worksheet when it's finished. So that's the first part of creating a button to take us to the student's worksheet automatically. It's a three-part process. You create the button, then you create something called a macro, and then you assign the macro to the button so that when you click on the button, the macro runs and it takes you to the student's worksheet. A macro is like a little recording of something that you do quite often, that you can assign to a shortcut button on the keyboard, or you can assign it to an object in your spreadsheet, so that when you hit the keyboard, hit that button on the keyboard, or you click on the button, it goes through that process that you've recorded and saves you having to do that every time. If it's something you do quite often and it's made up of several steps, then a macro is a good way to save a lot of time. So I'm going to create the macro now. And you do that, if you follow my pointer up here to the View tab up here, and across to Macros, and clicking on the down arrow there to get the menu up, and I'm going to click Record Macro to create my the macro that I'll then assign to the Students button that I've created. And the Record Macro dialog box pops up. The first thing you have to do is give your macro a name, because we're going to end up with 4 macros here, one for each button. So you need to be able to tell them apart in a list of macros that you have in your spreadsheet. So I'm going to call this one, just to differentiate it from other macros, I'm going to call it Switch to Students Worksheet. I'm typing that in here now, a bit like, I've still got caps lock on there, I'm going to turn that off. In common with, if you remember from the last video, named cells, where we made a cell called funding allowance in the funding worksheet. In common with the names of named cells and named ranges, you're not allowed any spaces in the names of macros. So I'm going to use underscore there. Switch to underscore students. Students worksheet. Like I say, this is purely so that you can tell these worksheets apart if you've got a list of them, which you will have later on. Now here you see I talked earlier about how you can assign a macro to a keyboard, a key on the keyboard. You can do that here, but we want to actually assign this to the button that I've created, so I'm not going to put anything in there. The store macro in, this just gives you options of where this macro will work. We only really want it to work in this workbook, which is the default value there. You can get it to work in all workbooks that you create, which might work in different situations, but for this situation we just want this macro to work in this workbook, in this spreadsheet. So I'm going to leave that at the default value, which is this workbook. It's worth giving it a description, just again so that when you've got a list of all your macros, and there's going to be a few in this spreadsheet, and in other spreadsheets that you might create in the future there might be dozens of them, so it's worth giving it a description as well. So I'm just going to give this one a brief description there. So I've called it this macro switches to the students worksheet. Notice in the description you are allowed to use spaces. Now when I click OK, now the macro will start recording, and it'll record everything that I do. But don't worry, it just records the sequence of the things that you do, not the time that it takes you to do them. So it's not like you have to do it really, really quickly. It'll just record what you do and not when you do it. And when I click OK, the only sign that the macro is being recorded is down here, way down here. There's a stop button for when I've finished. That's the only sign that the macro is running, really. What I'm going to do is I'm going to switch to the students worksheet like that. The macro is recording. It's recorded me doing that, and I'm going to hit the stop button, and my macro is recorded. If I now go to macros again and go to view macros, there it is. That's the only real evidence that the macro has been recorded. So that's step 2 of creating this first navigation button, is to record the macro. The final step is simply to assign the macro that we've created to this button, so that when we click this button, the macro runs and it switches to the student worksheet. And that's very simple. All you do is you right click on the button. Let's try that again because I moved slightly when I was clicking. And there is an option down here in the menu that pops up called Assign Macro. We've only got one at the moment, so we click on that, and this is the process of assigning the macro that we've just created to that button. Click OK. That macro is now assigned to the button we created, so you can tell that when I hover over it, you can see there's a hand there, a bit like a hyperlink. I click on that, and it switches automatically to the student worksheet. Let's test that a couple of times. That's working brilliantly. So I'm going to go ahead now and just create another 3 buttons for the other worksheets. I'll come back to you when I've done that. And there are my other 3 buttons. Let's check that they're working. Courses. Switches to the courses worksheet. Enrollment. Yep, that one's working. That's the enrollment worksheet there. And funding. That one works. You can see I've made each button a different colour. That's entirely up to you. The look of the button, the colours of the button. I like to see a bit of variation there in everyone's worksheets. Or not everyone's looking like this. So it's your chance to make yours a little bit different for everyone else's there. We still have a bit of not a problem as such, but it's still when I can go to students with this navigation button here, but then I have to go back to home again. Courses, back to home with the existing button down here. So it'd be worth creating a button to go back to home on every sheet as well. We really would then have a very slick navigation system, because we'd be able to go to each sheet and then back to home and then another sheet and back to home very, very quickly. So I'm going to create another button on each sheet, which will take me back to the home sheet down here as well. And it's exactly the same 3 stages. You create the button. So I'm going to choose an arrow, I think, for this one. Sort of representing a back, the idea of going back to. Again, with the insert shapes, you've got the option of quite a lot of nice sort of colour schemes and appearance for your button there. And again, it's edit text, and call this one home, because it'll take me back to the home sheet. Same thing as before, centralize the text, make it a bit bigger. What was it last time? About 40 was good, I think, wasn't it? I'll need to highlight the text for this though. Exactly the same thing, like that. So I'm going to create the macro for this now. I showed you that earlier, so I'm going to make the macro for this now. Pause the video there, and then we'll come back to it when it's working. Okay, so I've created my macro for this button, and actually for all the other sheets as well. So now when I click on home, it goes back to students. I've then copied the home button to the courses sheet as well, and the enrollment sheet and the funding sheet. So now you can see we've got a very quick, very slick way of moving around within the spreadsheet. Much bigger buttons than these. These still work, of course, fine, but these are much better. And that's it for this video, all about creating the user interface. If there's any of it that you didn't understand, of course, you can go back through it, rewind, pause, have a go yourself until you've really cracked it. And I'll see you on the next video, which will be about how to create an exit button on the home worksheet right here, using some Visual Basic code. So I look forward to seeing you then. Bye.